Thank you, Julie. Good evening, everyone. My name is Karim Atif, and I'm the chair of the IIRSM branch in Egypt. Welcome to the 11th IIRSM branch meeting in Egypt. Our guest speaker today is Andy Farrell. Andy is both a fellow member of the IIRSM and a chartered member of the IOSH. He also holds membership of the Institute of Industrial Accident Investigator and the membership of the Institute of Leadership and Management, and is accredited as a health and safety consultant with the UK Occupational Safety and Health Consultant Register. During his career as a health and safety specialist, he has undertaken a wide range of consultancy and training projects, including a forensic investigation in the potential liabilities arising from the collapse of a building, which was undergoing refurbishment in central London, acting in this case as advisor to the Defence Council, and the development and presentation at board level of a specialist safety course for managers in the gas distribution sector, and developing and presenting a series of courses on critical decision making for paramedics and officers in the Irish National Ambulance Service, done in partnership with the National Ambulance Service College. He has also written a book on interview techniques, investigative interviewing, a practical guide for managers. His current projects including developing and presenting a series of management webinars for a prestigious UK training company, and co-authoring a book and training course on fundamentals of health and safety management for non-specialist managers and directors. So our agenda for today meeting will be, firstly, I will speak about our branch updates. After that, we will listen to Andy, who will be presenting on competency and the incident investigation team. Finally, there is a Q&A session, so if you have any comment regarding to the topic of the webinar, feel free to submit it in the question box and we will answer all your questions before the end of the meeting. Regarding to our branch updates, this is just a reminder for all the IIRSM members to gain access to the brand new member resource hub through using my IIRSM email address to log in. It's a library of information, tools, and resources mapped to the IIRSM risk management and leadership competency framework. It is designed to support you in connecting and learning and sharing with your peers. The member resource hub will evolve into a unique and single source of content for the risk professionals. Some of the features that are included in the hub, like the video content, including on-demand webinars, insightful reports on emerging issues in the risk management, the IIRSM knowledge and perspective series article, digital publications, and the quick and digestible top tips to get you thinking. Also, based on your feedback and contributions, the IIRSM will continually adding contents to this platform, ensuring the IIRSM is providing you with the relevant insights through leadership and opportunities from around the world and across the community of the members. Regarding to our future branch meetings, as usual, our meetings will be delivered on monthly basis. So the next branch meeting will be on the 11th of October. The topic and the speaker will be confirmed shortly. And regarding to the CPD and training opportunities that will be delivered in September, there will be 4 upcoming international branch meetings delivered in September. The first one is the UAE branch meeting, which will be on the 14th of September. Luke Cogan will be presenting on the mental health. And the second one is the KSA branch meeting, which will be on the 20th of September. The third one is Qatar branch meeting. This meeting will be on the 27th of September. And the final one is the India branch meeting, which will be on the 28th of September. Regarding to the UK branch meetings, also there will be 4 upcoming UK branch meetings delivered in September. The first one is Yorkshire branch meeting, which will be on the 15th of September. Billy Cunningham will be presenting on fire safety in the built environment. The second one is a Scotland branch meeting, which will be on the 21st of September. Nick Bramhall will be presenting on electrical arc flash hazards. And the third one is London branch meeting, which will be also on the 21st of September. And the final one is Southeast branch meeting, which will be on the 22nd of September. Kristen Harris will be presenting on the slips, trips, falls, hazards. So you can visit the IIRSM website to find out more information about the mentioned meetings, along with how to register for those meetings. So this is the update for me regarding to our branch. So now I will hand over the meeting to Andy, who will be presenting on the competency and the incident investigation team.
Lovely. Thank you, Karim.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me back yet again. I appreciate it. Hope everyone enjoys the course. What we're going to talk about this time is the competency and the incident investigation team. So what we're going to do in this webinar, we're going to look at an overview of the skills, the knowledge, the other qualities which the incident investigation team will need if they're going to become competent investigators. And just a reminder about what we mean by the term competent. Somebody is classed as competent if they've got the skills, the knowledge, the understanding, and the other qualities which they need to make them effective at doing their job. So it's not just having theoretical knowledge or practical knowledge. As we'll see, it also comes down to a matter of attitude, the way they approach the job, how seriously they take it. So let's have a look at one of the main factors, I think, which is that of integrity. Investigators need to have integrity. What do we mean by that? Well, integrity can be defined slightly tongue-in-cheek as doing the right thing even when nobody's looking. Okay, that sounds a bit joking, but there's a lot of truth in that. If the person has integrity, then they will do the job properly because it has to be done properly. They'll take a pride in doing it properly. They're not doing it because somebody's watching them or because they're concerned about their reputation. They do it purely because getting it right is the correct thing to do. They take a pride in doing their job properly. Tied in with integrity is the duty the investigators got to conduct the investigation without fear or favor. In other words, it has to be neutral. But in the real world, this is not always going to be easy. Now, let's face it, you know, we're dealing with real people. You may have, for example, a situation where a senior manager may have concerns for whatever reason that the investigation might prove personally embarrassing to him. And so he doesn't want it to go down that road. He wants to control what the investigator does, but the investigator is meant to be independent. So in a way, there are two broad methods the manager could use if he wanted to try and influence the investigator. The first would be the direct threat. You know, I know who you are. You're junior to me. If you embarrass me, I'll make your life a hell, and you can wave goodbye to promotion. Okay, now that's not ethical, but sometimes with fear, people will do things like that. The other approach a manager may take, a little more political, is that he'll tell the investigator, oh, I understand you have to do your job, and I wouldn't want to get in the way. No, certainly not. You know, you must do as you think right. Oh, by the way, when am I due to see you to do your performance review? So there's a veiled threat in there that, you know, you do what you want, but I'm the one who does your performance reviews, and if I don't like you, you could get a bad review. These are realities. They're not nice to think about, but they are, I think, realities in large companies. And so it comes down to the company not only to choose their investigators properly, but also to have in place protections for the investigators, so that if they are being leaned on in some way, then just like a whistleblower, if you like, they've got somebody they can turn to, somebody who will help them to do their job without being put in danger, career danger, that is. So the company got to think about this, you know, is it likely that somebody may try and influence the investigation, in which case we've got to protect our investigators? Because if we don't protect them, then it's possible the investigation can be skewed. So that's a problem for the company to think about when they're planning the team. Who's going to look after the team and defend them if things start to get political? The other problem, of course, the investigators got with this without fear or favor task is that another employee might try and use friendship as a lever to affect the outcome. The other employee may feel that, rightly or wrongly, they're at risk, or their friends at risk, or so on, and so they try and bend the investigation. Can you do me a favor? For the sake of old pals, do me nobody will notice, but if you could just adjust your findings and so on. It's easy to try and do, but the investigator has to restrict it. He has to fight back against that, otherwise the investigation is going to be flawed. So having integrity is a very honorable thing to do, but also it can bring difficulties with it. It requires a certain amount of courage to have full integrity. The investigator, as part of the integrity, has got to go where the evidence takes him, even if he doesn't like it. He may not want to put his friend in an unfortunate position, but if that's what the evidence is suggesting, then that's the path he's got to follow. He can't back off because it's his friend, because it's got to be done without fear or favor. One final point about integrity is it doesn't mean you can't make a mistake. Now, people may ask you to adjust your findings because you have got things wrong. You've misunderstood, you've misread the situation, whatever. And so if they come to you with concerns, it may not be they're just trying to influence you. They may have a genuine concern. And the investigator, in the interest of being even-handed, has got to accept that. So by all means, listen to what their concerns are, treat those concerns with respect. If the person is mistaken, then you carry on as you were. If in fact they have got a legitimate concern about what you've done, that you have made a mistake, then integrity means you admit that mistake, if necessary, apologize for it, you adjust your findings, and you carry on. So integrity is essential, but it can be a hard taskmaster, but it has to be done. If the investigator doesn't have integrity, then you're not going to get very far. Let's now look at personality. What kind of person are we looking for? There's a variety of personality traits that we'd find useful in an investigator. The first one is reliability. Now, the investigator may well have to work, for whatever reason, without direct supervision. It may be the team is spread out over different locations or different departments, and so they're on their own. You've got to be able to trust them to do the job properly and not just take it easy because nobody's watching. You know, we'll do half the job. Oh yeah, I'll say I did it, but actually I didn't because I couldn't be bothered. You know, you want somebody who you know you can trust. If they're given the task, they will carry it out properly, even if the task may in itself be boring. If for some reason they've got to wade through a mountain of accident reports to try and find a trend, or they've got to wade through manufacturers' manuals to see what he said about this particular piece of equipment in these circumstances, that can be boring, but it has to be done because investigations have got to be done thoroughly, and sometimes it is tedious. I mean, I used to work as an investigator at Customs, I was working on fraud investigations, and you could generate an awful lot of paperwork, all of which had got to be examined. I remember one case I was involved in. Luckily, I wasn't a case officer, but Sandy, who was, she had a responsibility. There was something like 2,000 pieces of documentary evidence which were going into this trial, and she had to check them all and know where they sat in the investigation. 2,000 pieces of paper. That's a bit mind-bending, but she had to do it because she did her job properly and she could be relied upon to do it. So sometimes the work can be a little bit tedious, but you've got to know each member of the team is pulling his or her weight. Then the investigator has to be neutral. An investigation, just to recap, the idea of investigation is to find out what happened so you can stop the accident happening again. That is the primary aim of investigation. So it's all about collecting and then interpreting evidence. And to get the evidence collected and interpreted correctly, the investigator has to remain neutral at all times. It is very easy to start forming an impression of where you think the investigation is going, and without realizing it, that can actually bias the way you look at the investigation. You can't allow your personal feelings to intrude, because then you're going to skew the outcome of the investigation. If, for example, the investigator doesn't like somebody on a personal level for whatever reason, and he allows that to become apparent in the interview, his attitude, his manner is going to reflect on the person. He's going to show he doesn't like them. They therefore will realize he's not taking them seriously, and it's going to affect the way they answer questions. So you get a cumulative effect. You're not getting all the evidence, you're not getting it truthfully, it's not there completely, because the feelings are getting in the way and emotions are taking over. So the investigator has to be neutral, keep his personal feelings to himself. He may think that this person, regardless of the aims of the investigation, he may think this person is a complete waste of space and the sooner he's fired, the better. But that's only your personal opinion. He can't allow that to affect the way he listens to the person, the way he speaks to them, and the way he interprets what they say to him. He's got to give their evidence full neutral value. So reliability, neutrality, these are key. So I mentioned there about the investigator trying to control his emotions if it's dealing with somebody he doesn't like. So this is taking us on to people skills. Again, a key part of the investigator's armory, as a skill which the investigator needs to have. The first part of that is to have empathy. So what do you mean by empathy? Empathy is the ability to see things from the other person's point of view. Now, there's often confusion over this, that people think that to be empathetic means that you have to agree with the person, and you don't. But what is being asked of you is that you try and see it from their point of view so you can understand why they did what they did. You can see things the way they see things. If, for example, they felt that they were being threatened in some way, that's going to affect their performance. Unless you realize that, then their performance may seem a bit of a mystery to you. So you've got to see things from their point of view. It'll give you an insight, a valuable insight into what they did and why they did it. And as I said at the bottom of this slide, this is essentially, it's especially important when we come to consider the topic of human error. Because with accident investigations, it is very tempting to put it down to human error. He got it wrong. He didn't follow the rules. It's his fault. And then it's up to management to blame him or not. But then you switch the investigation off. We found the problem. He got it wrong. If you're trying to find out why the accident happened, so you stop it happening again, then it's important you look at it from his point of view. Why did he not follow the rules? Why did he do what he did? And if he felt that maybe the system was getting out of control and he was trying to stop it to protect the process, then that gives you a different insight in the way he behaved. Because often accidents happen, people have got a limited view of what's going on. They get limited information, maybe limited training, and of course they don't have the benefit of hindsight. You know that what this person did caused a problem, but that's in the past. You know what happened. He didn't know. He didn't realize what he was doing was going to cause a problem. So why did he do it? So this empathy gives you a viewpoint. It gives you a chance to look at things from where he's standing, and that can be very, very important. The other thing to think about, and again, it's coming back to treating people with respect, is showing consideration to people. In an investigation, it can be possible to get things so tied up. You know, you focus on the accident itself and you forget that this actually involves people, human beings with feelings and with emotions. So witnesses are people. The people involved in the accident are people. And as such, they've got to be treated with respect. Bear in mind, they may well have been traumatized by what happened, whether they simply watched it or whether they were involved in what happened, whether they had a key role to play, makes no difference. They were actually watching the accident, and who knows what effect it's had on them. So you've got to have some compassion for them when you're interviewing them. You don't become all formal. You've got to treat them with respect. So when you're choosing an investigation team, you need somebody who has that human aspect to him, who can see people as people and not just cogs in a machine, not just a job holder or somebody who has a particular title. He's the driver, he's the machine operator, he's the crane operator. They see these as actual people with families, friends, and feelings, and can take that into account. And this ability to treat people with respect also has a value when you put yourself into the investigation. How do you behave? How do people see you? Because some people, if they're, that's a risk you've got to think about, if they're selected for the investigation team, they might get a little bit over eager. It might inflate their ego. You know, I'm important. I'm part of the investigation team. Aren't I brilliant? You know, I'm one of only a few out of hundreds who've been chosen for this very, very important job. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe you are one of 300 or 400 to be selected. But the point is that doesn't make you a superior person. It just gives you a different job. And they have to bear that in mind. The investigator has to have, if you like, humility. You know, you're doing a job, but that doesn't make you better than everybody else. And so therefore you treat people with respect. And whether you are talking to a company director or you're talking to the car park attendant, they are people. And they are entitled to respect, they're entitled to compassion, and you treat them with respect and with dignity. A very good way of wrecking an investigation is to start getting pompous with people, because when you start to question them and you're talking down to them, you can almost guarantee you're not going to get the right answers, because either they'll suddenly have what you might call corporate loss of memory, amnesia. Oh, I can't remember. Oh, I don't know. Oh, I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. I was looking the other way. They just don't want to know. Or if you really get them annoyed, they'll start to feed you false information just to send you off on a wild goose chase. It's your own fault. You wound them up and now you're paying for it. You've got to treat people with respect. It's the right thing to do. And also from the investigation point of view, it actually has benefits. You get more information because people will talk to you. If they don't talk to you, you don't get valuable information. And that takes into investigative skills, how to investigate, how to talk to people, how to get the information. Now, if you're not used to investigations, they can seem overwhelming. Going back to, it's not an active investigation, but the job that Sandy was involved in, a corporate fraud, with just 2,000 pieces of evidence. And I forget how many hundred witnesses had to be interviewed. It is a very, very big job. So an investigation can appear overwhelming. So what the investigator has to be able to do, they need the quality, the emotional quality, that they can stand back and break it down into logical chunks. So they do this on a logical step-by-step basis. I'm minding the phrase about facing big problems. It's rather like eating an elephant, but one mouthful at a time. It seems impossible, but with time you can do it. So the investigator has to be able to think logically and to see what is the initial concern, what are the important factors, what are the less important, and then approach them in that order. He's got to remember that each step of the investigation is the foundation for the next step. You are building an inquiry, you are building a result. Now, if you have wrong foundations, if they're weak, or if you miss something out, then the problem is that the whole investigation may suddenly crumble on you. So you have to put things in place. And that's why we're talking about being methodical, reliability, thinking logically. You've got to think what you're doing. And it comes down to integrity. If the investigator is taking side steps at the beginning, he's going to be putting bricks in place to the investigation, which are actually a bit weak. And his colleagues may not realize. But they are putting their part of the investigation together, but they're balancing it on the work that he did. But because he couldn't be bothered, because he didn't have integrity, he didn't do the job properly, they are building their investigation on very weak foundations. And there's a risk, a very real risk, that those flaws will become apparent and the whole investigation will just fall to pieces. So everybody has got to be methodical in what they're doing and take each step seriously, piece by piece. There has to be an eye for detail as well. The incident scene has a story to tell, which is why you need to investigate the scene properly and methodically, with photographs, with sketches, and so on. You only get one chance at the scene, so you get as much information as you can. But if you haven't got an eye for detail, if you take things at face value, you could miss things. For example, the forklift driver says, oh, I braked hard and I swerved and I couldn't avoid him. Okay, that's fine. But what does the scene tell you? For example, if he braked hard, you'd expect to find skid marks. So are there any? And if not, why not? Is it because, and again, you're being methodical, you're thinking about it, you're not open-minded, You know, are there no skid marks because he didn't brake? Or are there no skid marks because the surface just doesn't yield skid marks? It was very, very wet, for example. But you look at it, what's it telling you? If he swerved, as he said, and assuming that the scene hasn't been moved since the accident, that nothing's been touched, and that's crucial. If he swerved, you would expect that the steering wheels on the forklift, whether they be the rear set or the front set, whichever one does the steering, you'd expect those to be at an angle to the body of the vehicle because he was turning when he stopped. Now, if those wheels are in line with the body, that suggests he was going in a straight line. That doesn't say he's lying to you. He may be convinced he swerved. In fact, he didn't, but he's convinced himself he did. But the scene gives you the clue if you bother to look for it. So you look at all the evidence, not just superficially, but in detail. You need the eye for detail. Which way are the wheels pointing? Where are the skid marks? How far the vehicle traveled? Could he actually see what was going on? Could the other person see him? And so on. You analyze and you keep checking it all over. But the devil is in the detail. And many investigations hinge on small bits of detail. You have to be analytical. I've already said you don't jump to conclusions because that can take you off in the wrong direction completely. We had a case in the UK, a police inquiry over the 1970s, I think it was, a serial killer in the north of England. And the assistant chief constable, a very senior officer who was running the investigation, he got into his mind from certain evidence, he got into his mind that that person came from a particular part of the countryside. They'd had a tape recording sent by the alleged killer with a very pronounced accent. And he decided that was the person. And there's no real evidence to support that, but he decided it was. And the whole investigation pivoted to look at what turned out to be the wrong part of the country. He jumped to a conclusion. He believed that's where the killer came from, and that's what they did. Everything focused on that part of the world. And in fact, they missed the killer completely. He was found by accident some time later. He was arrested for something totally different. And then it was discovered he was the killer. So you've got to think about what you're doing. You don't jump to conclusions. It's what you might call a rookie mistake, but it's a very serious mistake to make. So what you have to do, you have to be, it goes back to humility. You've got to realize you can make mistakes. You may think you're an ace investigator, but it doesn't mean to say you can't make mistakes. And so what you need to do is to go back at intervals and to check the evidence you've got and ask yourself, where did it come from? What am I saying? Why am I saying? The key question is, how do I know? The driver swerved. How do I know the driver swerved? Apart from the fact that that's what he's told me. Have I got any other evidence about that? I think that he made an error, but how do I know he made an error? Why am I thinking it's him and not somebody else? Why do I think that is what's happened? You have to constantly check. And it's a good point actually for the team as a whole to talk these things through and not argue about it, but to put in the pros and cons of evidence. And the people in the team need to have that, as I say, the humility, the professionalism to accept the criticism. If somebody says, I don't agree with you, I think you're wrong, I don't think that's what that means, to be able to discuss it rationally and not get argumentative about it. Because you're not protecting your position, you're trying to work out what happened. The investigation takes priority. Training and experience. We talked about the qualities the person may need, that's fine. But they also need training and experience. You can't just throw somebody into an investigation, especially a serious one, and say, well, get on with it. They do need training. So we've looked at some of the skills they need, some of which can be taught. Examining the scene of an incident. Yes, you can set up mock incidents, and then you can examine them. People write a report on what they think it means. Then you can go through it, talk about it, and show, you missed this, and it was well you spotted that, and so on. But there are two other skills which you actually need, and that's gaining an understanding of human error and report writing. Now, human error is a very big field. Let's look at that in more detail. A major mistake in any investigation is to simply blame somebody. He got it wrong. He shouldn't have done that. The rule says you're meant to do this and this, and he didn't do it. So therefore, it's his fault. That is the easy way out, because you're not looking at why they did it. And crucially, even if they did get it wrong, you haven't figured out why they got it wrong. So therefore, you don't know how to stop the accident happening again. As I said at the bottom of the slide, you're trying to find the cause, not just apportion blame. And if you don't know why he did it, you don't know why the accident happened, so you haven't found the cause. But I say, human error, it's very easy to blame people. Many academics now are arguing that human error is actually an indicator of a deeper fault within the system. There's a chap called Professor Sidney Dekker from a university in Brisbane, I think, and that's his approach, and he's a renowned academic, and that's his argument, that it basically, people go in to do work normally. Yes, you get people who are lazy sometimes, and people are incompetent and can't be bothered, but they're the minority. Most people go to work with the intention of doing a reasonable job. They don't go to work with the intention of having or causing an accident. So why did it happen? Well, it comes back to looking at things from their point of view, to the empathy idea. Maybe the person was operating with a flawed system that wasn't running properly, or had been given incomplete information. Or maybe there's a problem inside the system itself. It's not doing what they want it to do. The system's developed a fault. They cannot control it. Some processes are very complex, and maybe something's gone wrong inside the control systems, a software fault or whatever, and they can't stop it happening. And they're doing what they can. They're virtually making these up as they go along, anything to try and halt the process, to stop the accident happening, but it didn't work. You have to dig into why these things happened. I'll give you an example of how it could be very easy to blame somebody for an accident, but in fact it wasn't their fault. And this was an aircraft accident in the USA just after the Twin Towers incident. 2001 was that? Aircraft took off from New York, an Airbus airliner, and within about 10 minutes, the aircraft had crashed and everybody on board was killed. When the investigators looked at the wreckage, they found an interesting thing, a puzzling thing, was that the tail of the aircraft, the vertical fin where the rudder is, had come off completely. And they found it in a lake about 2 miles away. So what on earth happened? It wasn't a bombing, because that's not how bombs work. They did their investigations. They got the black box recorder with the flight information on, and they discovered that the co-pilot, the first officer, just before the accident, was applying the rudder vigorously, left and right, flicking it around, because apparently the aircraft was flying through turbulent air, and he was trying to stabilize the aircraft. And when they talked to Airbus about that, Airbus said, well, there's your problem. You can't do that. The Airbus isn't designed for that. It works on things like a 747, but it doesn't work on an Airbus. And in fact, we told the airlines deliberately, very carefully, to tell the pilots you can't do that because you put an extra load on the rudder and it will snap the tail fin off, which is what's happened. So it seemed fairly clear. The first officer, who'd only recently gone to Airbus, he was using the wrong technique, and that caused the tail fin to come off and the aircraft crashed. So it's his fault. Human error. He got confused, forgot which aircraft he was flying, used the wrong procedure. Seems quite straightforward. Luckily, the investigators didn't stop there. They went back into his training. He'd had to do a conversion course to go on the Airbus. He was a qualified pilot, but he'd been flying 747s. He had to go take another course to understand the Airbus. They looked in detail at the syllabus of that course. And despite what Airbus had said about all airlines have been told, the American Airlines package for training had no mention about using the rudder when you're flying. So that pilot was behaving with incomplete information. He'd not been trained properly. He didn't know that what he was doing was wrong. He thought it was right. So it wasn't his fault. It was the fault of the training program, which had been badly written and a complete section missed out. So that makes the point about it's very easy to blame people until you find out why they did it. You put yourself in their position. What did they know at the time? And that gives you a totally different perspective on what actually happened. It's not easy to do, and it does require a mindset. And some people can do it, some people can't. But if the investigator is not prepared to stand back and reevaluate everything in that light, then he's not going to do the job properly. The last point I wanted to make really is report writing. Now, some people don't like writing reports. It's tedious. But any investigation, you need to have a detailed report because it's going to explain to management not only what happened and why it happened, but also it'll suggest the corrective measures that can be put in place and who's going to put those measures in place and in what time frame. So there's no mention there of blame. All you're doing is saying, this is what happened. These are the facts. This was done or that wasn't done, and that was the result, and therefore we corrected by A, B, and C. So that's what you have to do. So your report has got to be detailed, and it's got to be not subjective, it's got to be analytical and professional as a tool to help the managers. That's the first thing your report's got to do, is to help management. But also, of course, you've got to bear in mind that the accident may lead to legal proceedings of some kind. Now, it may be the company's going to get prosecuted by the regulatory authorities for breaching health and safety, or it could be that relatives or other people are going to claim damages from the company, claim compensation, alleging negligence, and whatever. So that report could take a very large part, or could play a major role in the investigation, in the actual legal proceedings. So that means that the lawyers from both sides are going to look at that report and they may be hostile to it, because either looking for bits to support their case or looking for bits to knock down the other side's case. So it's going to be right in the middle of the battlefield, the legal battlefield. So you write that with the knowledge that that could happen. I did an accident investigation report about 2 years ago on behalf of a client. Their employee had been very badly injured on a building site accident. Now, I think my report ran to about 10, 12 pages. It wasn't particularly long because I looked at one small part of what had happened to the overall accident. But even so, I think it took me about 3 days to write that report. And I kept revising it and revising it and revising it. because I was aware he had been critically injured. There could well be enforcement action because the health and safety executive, the authorities, were called in immediately because it was a near fatal accident. So they could take action against people involved. And also there's very likely, because I doubt he'll ever work again, there's going to be some kind of legal claim for compensation for alleging negligence. So that report could well have ended up in the middle of the whole legal fight. So hence I took about 3 days to write a 12-day report, which is fairly simple. But I did it knowing what was expected. And one thing I had to do all the time, went through it, was to keep asking myself, how do I know? Because that's the question that the other side are going to ask. The lawyers will ask, Mr. Farrell, you said this. Why? Where's your evidence? Or do you know? Or are you simply guessing? Where's your evidence to support what you're saying? So you have to go through your report line by line, anticipating that question. And can you meet the question? If you can't, take that line out because it's simply trouble. Put it in another way. When people know their reports are not only going maybe to senior management, to the board of directors, but also could go to the lawyers, some people could panic. Some people may not want to get involved in that, in which case their role as investigators is going to be limited. And some people may not have the writing skills. You can teach the writing skills, but they've got to have the confidence and again the integrity to stand up and be counted. Yeah, that's what I found. That's what I'm saying, and I'm saying it because of this, this, and this. Some people just do not appreciate that, and they don't like to be challenged or to be criticised. They don't want it. They find it uncomfortable. If that is their emotional background, if you like, if that's their personality, that they don't like to be put into a conflict situation, they don't want to be challenged, they're not prepared maybe to stand up in court sometime and give their evidence and be cross-examined, then maybe they're not the people you need to be investigators. They may have very analytical minds, but if they're not prepared to stand up and justify what they've found, then at the end of the day, the report's going to fall apart. So there you go. Just to summarize then, it's not pleasant to think about, but it is possible that accidents can happen, internal investigations are required, and so the organization should be prepared for this eventuality. So you prepare beforehand, you have your team trained and experienced, and maybe even put through a couple of exercises so they know what they're doing. So if that fateful day arises and something goes seriously wrong, you need to investigate, they're not starting from zero. They know what they're doing, and they've got some idea of how to do it. On the people on the team you select, they've got to be competent. Skills, knowledge, understanding, and the other qualities, like the willingness, if necessary, to stand up and be challenged and to fight their corner, to say what they found and why they say this. Not everybody can do that. So you've got to select these people with care. Give them the training, but evaluate their personality as well. Have they got what it takes to be an investigator? Or are they simply maybe very good at writing reports or very good at reading technical drawings, but they haven't got the whole package? And you've got to accept that not everybody can do it successfully. Some skills can be taught, but you need these personal traits like the inquiring mind, the neutrality, methodical approach. So all in all, you've got to be careful when you select your investigators, but you select them and you train them before you have the accident. I think the worst situation you can have is when somebody rings you to say, the ambulance has just arrived, you had an accident, who's going to investigate it? And you haven't got the faintest idea. It's best to be prepared. Okay, it's coming up towards 5 to 7 UK time, 5 to 8 Egypt time. So thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. It's part of a series of webinars which I've done for IIRSM Egypt. And in fact, before we came on air, Karim's asked me to do a couple more. He's a glutton for punishment, that lad. But I've looked at a complicated situation just overall, give you a flavor of it. If you think I can help you or your organization, then please feel free to contact me on my email. Always happy to chat, not a problem. So on that happy note, I'll say thank you for listening, and I'll pass you back to Karim. Karim, it's all yours.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for this informative session. So Julie, if you have any question.
Yes, I have one so far. So this is from Badley. He says, how do I get my workshop manager to have a safety culture without having the knowledge that I have? That's an interesting one.
Woohoo! Yeah. That's an interesting one. Developing a culture, you've got to, I think let's go back to first principles. They won't see a safety culture unless they appreciate the value of safety. So I think maybe a starting point, and this is a very big topic, developing a safety culture, is to sit down with the workshop manager and have a chat to about safety, what he thinks safety is. Go back to the idea of empathy. Put yourself in his position. He's obviously got a view about safety. Why? Well, I don't know if Bradley is senior to him or junior to him or the same grade as him, but try and have a conversation with him without lecturing or arguing, just a discussion, maybe over a cup of coffee. What is it about safety which you don't like? And it may be he's had a bad experience with it. He's had people, the wrong kind of safety officer who simply quotes rule books to him all the time, but doesn't actually help him. Or it may be he just doesn't see the need for health and safety. So maybe a discussion can be held about that. It's an interesting topic. And I wish him well, but I think it starts with the conversation. You know, why have we not got a culture? What is it you don't like about health and safety? Why do you not see a value in it? But you treat their comments with respect. You're not looking for something you can knock down. You genuinely want to know what it is that they see wrong with safety or unimportant about safety. And once you know where the common ground is, then maybe you can start to build, but it'll take time.
Thank you, Andy. That was a really good answer considering it was a large question. So we've got a question here from Mohammed. Don't you think that it is okay sometimes to get a bit aggressive in talking in an investigation if you know that someone is lying and you want to get the truth from him?
Do you want to buy my book and explain why? No, the problem is once you start getting aggressive with somebody, okay, so they know you think they've got information which you want and they're not giving it. The moment you start getting aggressive with them, bear in mind you're not a police officer, they're not under arrest, you've got no power over them. If you start getting aggressive and they have their wits about them, their first comment will be, don't speak to me like that. You can't talk to me. I'm not standing for that. They get up and they walk out of the room and you can't stop them. You lose the investigation, you lose the interview. So you've got to bite your tongue and work your way around it. There are ways of doing it, but losing your temper with them or being aggressive to them just gives them the opportunity to actually walk out. And if they don't walk out, you give them the opportunity to say, that was an oppressive interview. He was leaning on me. He was shouting at me. I just said anything to get out of the room, but I didn't mean what I said. So whichever way you look at it, shouting at somebody is a bad technique. I don't recommend it.
Thank you. That's a really good answer. We've got several comments saying, thank you, great presentation. I particularly like this comment. This is a wide topic and cannot be covered with one webinar. I request you to make another great presentation, which I think is a really nice comment. And then we've got a question from Ahmed. Which incident investigation method do you prefer and why? And it's got ICAM or fishtail. Does that mean anything to you? Doesn't to me.
I think what we're talking about there are different methods of analysing the evidence rather than doing the investigation itself.
Okay.
And in fact, one of the topics that Karen's asked them to look at is examining the evidence from the investigation, which I think is the next topic we've got lined up. So I think he's referring to the what's it called? The thing is the fishbone diagram for showing out timelines, which is a very useful tool. But yeah, we'll probably look at that in the next webinar that Karen's asked me to do.
Okay, thank you. Right, this one's a long question, so I'll try and do it justice.
Okay.
Very well versed indeed. Thank you, Andy. How do we handle a situation where the assigned investigation is assigned to a person who has no technical knowledge on the incident that occurred, i.e. assigned as an on-call and there's a reported collision with a tram, for example, but then the on-call staff is not competent with technicalities of the incident? Hopefully I did that question justice.
Yeah, it is a problem. There is an argument in some cases for bringing in outside consultants who may have specialist knowledge. I think what you've got to do is be honest and identify which bits of the investigation you can do because you understand them, and where you've got technical detail, where you don't have technical knowledge, then you go and talk to somebody who you trust who has got that technical knowledge, because it could be important. So you can't really run an investigation on your own if you don't know the process. For example, I wouldn't try and run an investigation in an oil refinery, because oil and gas is not really my speciality. So oil refinery, I don't know much about it. So I'd get lost in the technicalities. So I'd have to bring somebody else in to help me. Yeah. So I think there are times when you need more than one person on the team, and sometimes you need specialist advice, and that sounds like that kind of a job.
Okay, thank you. That's really comprehensive. So the next question is from Mohammed. How many people should you have on an investigation team? I suppose that's a bit like how long is a piece of string, isn't it?
Funny enough, I talk about that in my book. It depends on the investigation. Yep. And the point is, it's a fluid number, because it may start off as maybe just one person investigating because it's a minor injury. The person sort of fell down the stairs and banged his head, but one person will look at that. And then the person in hospital, their condition deteriorates. It's going to get complicated. So you may need to ramp the team up. So somebody's got to decide, how complicated is this? Do we have sufficient resources to cover it, or do we need to bring in more people? Maybe one or two will have enough between them to do a competent investigation and write the report and so on. But it may be, if you've got, somebody's got to examine the scene, somebody's got to take witness statements, somebody has got to start checking documentary evidence, and you haven't got a lot of time to do it in, then you need a number of people just to keep the job running. So each job is basically on its own merits, and that's why you need, as part of your planning for the investigations, apart from just selecting the team and training them, you really need to work out some sort of scenarios as to where you're going to get these people from, how quickly you can get them, how many you need. So the company have got that flexibility. They can call in just a couple of people, or they can bring in a full, what I'll call a full circus, if you've got a really bad investigation, a really serious incident with a lot of repercussions. So that there is no sort of fixed, you need that number for this kind and that number for that kind. Each job depends on the situation, and you need to have somebody with the ability to make the decision, but it's not fixed. You may decide we need 6 people to come in here, and then find out actually 2 people can do it, so 4 can go home. Or 2 people can come in, we need 6, and we bring 4 more in. You've got to be flexible about it.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've got 3 more questions. I think one of them might be quite a quick one. I suspect to know the answer. Can I use violence to the witness to force him to say the truth? Perhaps not.
Of course you can, if you want to lose the investigation and be charged with assault. But if you want a real investigation, no.
Thank you. I thought I would ask it anyway. I didn't say who asked that question. The next one's from Bradley. Do you recommend the Swiss model approach?
I assume he's talking Swiss cheese.
I would have thought so as well.
Yeah. That's one way of working out the method, the causation for the accident, which will come into the analysis later on. It is a model. Some people don't like it. Some people do. There are many different models out there. But that's just one element of it. Yeah, I can see how Swiss cheese works, and it does give a good indication of how control measures can work and how they can fail. But the investigation is a lot more than just that. But yeah, if you want to analyze it and use the Swiss cheese as a model to work around, I don't see why not.
Thank you. I'll ask the last question now because I know we're running over time. So this is quite a long one. Hopefully I'll read it correctly. The system in most organizations makes a lot of professionals operate in a kind of survival mode with ethics eroded. The need to save the job. How do we find a balance with such conflict of interest? That's quite a complex one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if you've got a situation where there is this corrosion, that the pressure is on just to get the job done regardless of the ethical aspect to it, then the board of directors need to have a strong look at themselves, because it comes from them. That's what they want. If they want to run the company like that, then things are going to go wrong. People will take shortcuts. They won't get the right answers, and the company could end up in a lot of trouble. And my personal view is, if you work in that kind of toxic atmosphere where it doesn't matter, just do something, give us the answer we want, then I might be looking for another job.
Yeah,
I don't like that kind of. Yeah, ultimately, if you've got a toxic atmosphere in the organization, then the people at the top should at least know about it. And if they know about it, they should be doing something about it. And if they're not doing something about it, then they are remiss. Their responsibility.
Okay, thank you, Andy. We've got 3 more questions, but we've run over time. Do you want to answer them, or would you like me to send them?
Oh,
okay, are you still okay for time, Kareem?
No problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the last 3 questions. So if you have any questions, we won't be able to take them today. How important is it for an investigator to have knowledge of human factors and non-technical skills? That's from Nabeen.
Yeah, I mean, it is important. You've got to understand, it's crucial. You've got to have some understanding of how people work, what makes them tick. So it's not just down to the technicalities of health and safety management and the legal requirements and policies. It's ultimately, health and safety is about people. It's safety management. What do people do? How do they get things wrong? Why do they get things wrong? How can we help them get things right? How can we improve situations? So knowledge of human factors, causation. So yeah, these are important. It's not just being able to quote the legislation or the policies.
Thank you. The next one is just a comment. Whatever model is to be used, the investigation team must be good at the model to get better results, which I think you'll agree with.
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways of investigating. Each company will have its own way of doing things, depending on what industry they're in and so on, what the pressures are. But yeah, you've got to have the team, not only select your team, but they should all be working in the same direction with the same protocols. Otherwise, it's going to be confusion. Evidence is going to be lost. It's going to be misunderstood. The report could be a nightmare. So yeah, it's got to be coherent.
Yeah, thank you. I think you've already answered this question, only it was asked in a different way. First, thanks for this webinar and the valuable information, but I'd like to ask about the minimum number of investigators that can lead any incident investigation. That's from Marwan.
Right. the quick answer is you have one leader. So there's one person in charge, and then they may have sub-teams, each with, depending, it's a very, very big investigation. Let's say for some reason it goes across a network of companies or different plants across the country. So yeah, you have one person in charge to coordinate, and they may have small sub-teams, each with the team leader, but ultimately the chain of command goes back to one person, who then will take overall charge of the investigation. If you have two people trying to do it, then the danger is that they're going to go off in two different directions and you'll lose information.
Thank you, Andy. That was a really good question session. I'll hand over to Kareem for the closing comments now.
So thank you everyone for being part of our today branch meeting, and we are waiting you to see you in the next month branch meeting, and feel free to bring on your wider network. Also, I would like to thank you, Andy, for always accepting your invitation to speak in this fascinating series.
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you both. And I'd just like to remind everyone that their attendance certificate will come out this time tomorrow. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.